Welcome to Careers in Discovery, your window into the world of biotech leaders. On each episode, we interview the industry's leading executives to understand how they built their careers, what they've learned along the way, and the advice they'd give to their younger selves. This week on Careers in Discovery, I'm with Karin Conde-Knape, Senior Vice President of Global Drug Discovery at Novo Nordisk. Overseeing early-stage research, external innovation, and portfolio strategy at one of the world's most successful pharmaceutical companies is a fascinating job. And I talk with Karin about how Novo Nordisk has transformed over the past 7 years, the importance of human-centric drug discovery, and why AI, external partnerships, and a holistic approach to disease biology are shaping the future of the industry. I am delighted to be back on Careers in Discovery with Karin Conde-Knape. Karin, welcome to the show.
Hello, and thank you, Tom, for the opportunity to have a chat with you.
Of course. No, I'm very excited to talk to you. I don't know if I mentioned this when I got in touch, Karin. I saw your name in the Boston Business Journal. That was what led to me getting in touch. Yes. And so I'm fascinated to hear about your career in drug discovery.
Absolutely. That was an interesting piece that we put together because I am very passionate about external innovation, but we'll talk about that a bit as we go in.
Yes. And so by way of introduction, of course, Karin, you're the Senior Vice President of Global Drug Discovery at Novo Nordisk. I think most of our audience are probably going to be familiar with Novo Nordisk, but just in case they're not, can you tell us a little bit about the business, what your role is? Can you give us a little bit of a intro and overview?
Absolutely. So Novo Nordisk is a company based in Denmark that has been working for more than 100 years in diabetes as a core therapy area. And you probably are familiar with it for sure now on the treatments for the obesity that we have,
yes.
But even before that for diabetes with insulin. And over the last 6 years, we have actually engaged in a journey of expanding our therapy areas, making sure that, for the patients that we are serving beyond diabetes and obesity, we're taking care now of the comorbidities. So, diseases like the heart or the kidney or the liver and so on. So we have been very busy on that, and in my case, I am responsible for the early discovery to early clinical work, and within my team, I have all the therapy areas, which we have diseases of diabetes, obesity, and comorbidities, as I mentioned, but also rare diseases. And I
see.
Have the privilege of have a safety organization as well as an organization that focuses on external activities, which, as we can discuss, it's also quite important. And I've been here for 7 years, a week and 7 years.
Congratulations. Happy anniversary. I imagine it's a company that's changed a fair amount in that time as well. I mean, I remember when I first entered the biotech industry almost 20 years ago now, Novo Nordisk was obviously around, as you say. It's a very old, very established company. It was kind of a good mid-market pharma company, certainly not where it is today. Am I right in thinking the largest company in Europe these days?
Well, you know how it is that this goes
Sure.
ups and downs, but certainly the company has transformed itself over the last 7 years, not only because we started to increase the number of therapy areas that we were working on, but also from a pipeline perspective, also expanding the novelty of that pipeline, the size of the pipeline, and then also working with a human-centric approach, as we like to call it, making sure that we are starting from the patient, understanding what is really the unmet need, and then from there getting all the tools that will enable us to understand better what's wrong so that we can actually try to do something and fix it, right? So it's been quite an exciting journey, not only from the approach of research and early development, that's how we are tackling it, but also the importance that the external piece has played into this. I mean, and this is, of course, not unique to us. Every pharma is very much tapping into the external ecosystem. But for us in Novo, over the last 7 years, has also been that journey of realizing that we do need to play more an active role in the external ecosystem and also do the efforts through different tools of business development to help us be also a partner of choice, right?
Yes.
And that has been quite a fun journey as well. Not only we have been able to bring new assets into the pipeline, but also play with different tools, and that has been very exciting.
Yeah, and it seems like there's some very interesting things happening in and around Copenhagen now, and partly as a result of the activity that Novo Nordisk has been putting into the area too.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's a combination of how we are utilizing not only the local ecosystem, of course, but also in Boston, for example, where we started our presence a few years back. And that presence started with a very small team doing precisely playing around with a few tools to engage with the academics and the biotechs. But now we are having a presence from research and development. So the team is expanding there. We are expanding our footprint as well. So it's really becoming a reality. And now we have 2 research and development hubs, where of course the greater Copenhagen is one, and then now the greater Boston, another important, and still relying on other parts around the globe to help us support and bring the diversity that we need to, increase the innovation level that we have.
Absolutely. And I'm very interested, Karin, you've sort of described your role a little bit there, but there's a lot of variety in there, as you've touched on, in terms of internal versus external, in terms of disease areas, in terms of, the various different bits and pieces you have to think about. And I suppose it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that part of this is about maintaining this focus on human-centric drug discovery, shall I say. Clearly there's an obvious link between diabetes and obesity and comorbidities of that, and I think that sort of reflects, I suppose, as an industry as a whole, that we're looking more at the system of the body rather than just the symptoms of the disease. How does it play into the other things that you do as well? So the rare diseases and the external, tell us, I guess what I'm asking is, tell us a bit about how do you spend your time amongst all those different areas?
Yeah, for the longest time, I have been an individual that likes to think a little bit more holistic when we're thinking about how are we bringing solutions to the patients. And for me, that's been quite important because, as you clearly alluded to, so diabetes and obesity, maybe it's easier to recognize that they are more interrelated. But for some reason, we sometimes have the tendency to divide an individual and think only about the heart or think only about the liver or the kidney, when in reality, you're thinking about the one person that will have very likely complications in all of these different systems. And therefore, we cannot, from a research side at least, just continue to think in silos. So I have to continue to have the narrative with my research team to say, we need to be a bit more holistic. Thinking that what you do in one organ very likely will have impact in another organ, and therefore think a bit more than that, rather than locking ourselves too early into indications that maybe are not either the right one or the only one. So that's on the cardiometabolism piece. But from a rare disease, despite the fact that there are some elements that are very specific to the rare disease and to the indication biology, we are starting to see a lot more cross-fertilization as well, because there are biologies that might be relevant for rare diseases that also, from a pathophysiology, are also relevant in more of the larger indications.
I see.
So this is, again, just looking at the holistic space, how we can leverage biology. And then, of course, we have a privilege to be having access to different therapeutic modalities so that we can choose the best target and then marry it with the right technology to bring solutions to the patients. So that is, let's say, from a research side. And then, as I said, this is all based on human-centric, human data sets, spending less time in the preclinical area, right? Models are models, and then just going as quick as possible to the clinic with the right tools to test a hypothesis and make decisions, So that is, let's say, on that part. But at the same time, we understand that we cannot pretend to know everything or have all the solutions ourselves. So tapping into the external ecosystem is quite important. Now, in the diabetes and obesity space, it has been quite challenged over the last many years because the investment required to get to an inflection point was quite big. I mean, it
Right.
still continues to be, but
Yes.
back then, when it was about diabetes, that you needed to do cardiovascular, and then obesity was not even an indication, or there was not even a disease, and so on. Many investors left the field, and that meant that there was not a lot of ideas emerging, not a lot of entrepreneur spirit in that space. That, of course, is changing now, because all
Yes.
of a sudden obesity is starting to be recognized as a disease. There are treatments that are helping patients, and yet there is a significant gap in terms of residual risk that we still need to address. So this is where we also play now in the external ecosystem, not only trying to get ourselves in the space and be recognized as a company that is also interested in partnering, but also doing it in a different way from what others are doing, while tapping to some of the same tools.
Yes.
So again, our presence in Boston has been quite fundamental for that, but we are also expanding this in Europe and in Asia.
Yes.
So not every ecosystem is the same. Not every ecosystem requires the same approach or tools, and this is where we're trying to play with, to make sure that we are just utilizing the different variety of tools that you can have from a business development. So my day, just going back to the actual question that you asked me, it's actually very diverse, because as you can imagine, I can spend a day either working on the portfolio, having discussions around the portfolio, making the decisions as to what are projects that are worth continuing, versus working with the teams, helping them really understand what are the critical pieces that need to be addressed today versus those that can wait later on.
Yeah.
Or I can be having a conversation with an external company, understanding what is the value, or even more fun, trying to convince our executive team that it's worth an investment.
Right. Yes.
So a little
absolutely.
bit of everything.
But spending a lot of time exploring and discussing some very interesting science, I would imagine.
So that is if you ask me what is a fun day in the office, is the day that I have the opportunity to visit some of the teams in the labs.
Right.
And just to see, how proud they are of the science that they are doing, the technologies that they are exploring, or the data that they are generating. That for me is just the best, right?
Yeah.
It brings me back to the science, because at the end, I am a scientist at core.
Yes, and you've provided a perfect link for me, Karin, into the rest of our conversation, which I really want to talk to you about your career and your path to where you are today. So we always try and go all the way back. Why, for you, why science? Why drug development? Why this career for you?
Yeah, you could say that everything started when I was in high school.
Okay.
I had a teacher in chemistry that, I don't know, maybe she put chemistry in a way that really got me hooked to it. And as a consequence of that, I started studying in university chemistry applied to food science.
Okay.
And my vision at that time was that I was going to do food technology, and then end up working, I don't know, for Frito-Lay or for Nestle or some of these companies. But in that process, I got the opportunity to have an exchange program with the University of Arizona, and there I was exposed to applied science in the health on the health side. So this was my first exposure to heart disease.
I see. Okay.
Right? And then from there on, everything changed, because then I knew that basically that I wanted to do a PhD. So I came back to the University of Arizona to do a PhD, and there I met Roger Newton, who back then was a senior investigator in a pharmaceutical company, and he was behind the discovery of Lipitor, the atorvastatin, right, for cardiovascular disease. And conversations with him and the project that I had at that time was precisely related to this, and that made me realize that I wanted to stay in that track.
Yes.
So academia was not for me. I wanted science and applied science.
Yes, I see.
And then you fast forward a few years, postdoc and so on, and then I ended up having my first job at Roche in the US. Precisely one of those situations where you see an ad and then you see the description, and it reads, it almost has your name on it.
Right.
So I joined the team in metabolism, and right away I started working in the team there, bringing the holistic perspective, right? Because in that time, diabetes was only about sugar, carbohydrates, right, glucose, and I was coming with a lipid background, a cardiovascular background, so I started to marry the two. And then, a few years later, I moved to Europe with Roche, in charge of the pharmacology team.
Yes.
And here again, another place where you integrate, right? It's not about one single organ. You're talking about a full system, and then what is happening when you manipulate. So that was quite fun. And then I got a chance to go to J&J and do business development. And that was also another, fork in my career, because I had been doing the early discovery and biomarker and
pharmacology
for a few years, and this was something new.
Yes, absolutely.
And that was very appealing. So I spent 5 years, almost 5 years at J&J doing business development, and there I got exposed to so much, right? Not only science, which is obviously very fun, and you meet, fabulous people all around the world. But more importantly for me was the tools that you could utilize to help translate that science into a medicine.
Okay, I see.
And that gave me really a very different perspective of what you can do internally versus what you can do externally. And with those type of tools, then I was able to come back then to the research team now with Novo, which they were looking to expand in the new therapy areas.
Yes.
So now I come, not only with the background of research and early development, but also with the business development part. And then I think that brings a very good combination, because I think that helped me significantly. First of all, not having the bias of one versus the other, but understanding that you need to do both, but also being able to articulate and champion and bring forward many of the external licenses and acquisitions that we have done over the last 7 years.
Yes.
That has made now Novo what it is, in addition to, what is happening with the current obesity pipeline. So that has been quite fun.
It sounds like increasingly, sort of at each point, really moving more and more towards, yes, the science, but how do we really apply that science, and what's the impact of it, and you personally moving closer to actually products versus ideas and that kind of thing. That seems to be sort of the direction of travel.
Yeah, but you know what, Tom, this is, I think I have always been a curious person. So even very early while I was at Roche, I had the opportunity to have interactions with the commercial team.
Yes.
And interactions, one-to-one, just discussions to say that you do, right? What happens? How do you start to position? And all of that was really quite exciting, because, of course, I was doing such early work that you would never know if it was going to go anywhere. But then asking as to what was really the dilemmas, how were they having the conversations around, I don't know, launching in one country versus another. I mean, all of those things that then starts to give you a very different perspective of the whole value chain. And as you are able to integrate all of these and really have an enterprise mindset, it puts you in a very different position versus some other people that are only thinking down, right? So that flexibility of being, in the helicopter and then coming down to earth and then again in the space, if you want.
Yes, absolutely.
It's what has helped definitely throughout my journey.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes people underestimate the importance of that breadth of knowledge in developing their career, right? It's very important to be a specialist, especially early in your career, and we need specialists and we need people with that deep understanding, of course. If you are someone who wants to progress your career and take on broader responsibility and things like that, the people who understand, as you say, the full life cycle, the full picture of how a drug comes to a patient and several million patients, several tens of millions of patients perhaps, there's fewer and fewer people who understand that as the time goes on. So it's a useful thing to develop, I think.
Absolutely, and it's something that at the beginning is not necessarily easy, right? Because you try to be so focused on the one thing that you know, and then to take you out of that, it's difficult. But it's also something that you need to ask yourself if you really want to go there. But also, as with any career and path, you need to have the people that believe in you and that sponsor you and that really gives you the challenge and allow you to basically swim. Right. And I have been very fortunate of having a few individuals like that throughout my path that either believed in me and gave me my first, challenges as a leader.
Yes.
And then continue to appreciate that, you can be actually a good scientist and still be also a good leader. Right. And a manager and, whatever. And sometimes we tend to believe that this is not possible.
Okay. Yeah.
That you are either one thing or the other. And that's not true.
So what were the things that you did that helped you combine the two, do you think?
I think it's, when you start to see how decisions are being made and you start to understand what is the logic, right? And of course, you're standing from a different perspective versus where the decisions are being made, then you realize that, okay, if I was there, I would actually be making the decisions in a different way. Right. Then you realize that, okay, well, maybe you need to try to be there, right? Rather than doing the end of that. And still finding opportunities to stay true to the science and let the science help you in your decisions. And I think that's for me, that's why I was telling you a good day in the office is when I actually still can get close to the science, right? So it's, I don't think they are mutually exclusive, but certainly as you progress in your career and you become more strategic and more, it's more about being a catalyst rather than being an operational. And therefore you do need to let go of being a specialist and you just need to realize that you need to fill that gap or that need via other means. And it's not by just knowing, the pathway from A to Z and be able to recite all the different components of it, right? Like some specialists would do.
Yeah, and I suppose it's about sort of identifying and understanding, and it's hard to do from a specialist perspective, but identifying and understanding what are the underlying principles, what are the patterns, what are the repeated things that govern success and failure in drug discovery, for example, and those sorts of things.
Yeah, and I think that actually it brings it's about integration and it's about connecting the dots. And I think that is quite a fundamental skill to have in this journey. It doesn't really matter at what level you are, actually, is where by being open and being receptive to where the dots get connected, that some of the things happen, right? When we talk about serendipity in drug discovery and with some of the assets that actually made it as drugs, it's because people they are able to connect the dots and not just be blinded as to what they believe they are seeing or that they should see.
Yes, absolutely. The other thing that struck me about your career, Karin, is you've had a very international career. So you mentioned, the exchange to Arizona, then and then you're at Columbia, and then Roche in Switzerland, which I imagine was a bit different. Then London, and now Copenhagen. I'm a big advocate of people taking those opportunities if they can, and experiencing those different cultures. I think it's great for people's careers. As you navigated that pathway, which parts of it do you think probably have helped your career? Which things which were the realizations of when you moved around the world that were most impactful for you? Tell us a bit about what you've taken from an international career is my
I think, the world is so small now, and we are working in a global environment that maybe 10 years or 15 years ago was working at a different pace. And right now, of course, that gap and that time gap is really shortened significantly. And yet we need to recognize that there are cultural differences and ways of working that are different and so on. So as you are thinking to really progress in your career and be responsible for a more broad area or a global organization, it's quite fundamental that you have an understanding and appreciation of these differences. And it's not to say that this is good or bad, right? It's just different. But without having that exposure, it's very easy to just believe that everything is as you have experienced it by being in a single country, in a single state, in a single neighborhood, right? So that I think is quite important. It also teaches you tolerance. Tolerance, again, to just diversity of thought, but also at the same time, the value of having that diversity.
Yes.
Right? So I'll and this is also something that I try to say to the younger people that are coming to Novo or have been here. And I'll tell you a story because about 5 years ago, there was this young scientist that was finishing her stay at Novo as a postdoc. And of course, being in a company that is good and this person was doing good research and so on, wanted to stay.
Right.
And then this person came to me and asking for this. And I said, no, you need to go out.
Okay.
You need to go out, experience something else, work somewhere else. And then, of course, if you want to come back, then that conversation can happen. 5 years later, I am entering one of these discussions that I have with the scientists. And in the room, I noticed this person.
Okay.
And then as I am asking them, to tell me what's exciting and so on. And then this person goes like, I heard you, I left, I worked here, there, and now I'm back and I am bringing all of these things, right?
Yes.
And that was so rewarding because, probably the day that I told, you need to leave, that was not necessarily very popular, right?
Sure.
But now coming back, appreciating the wealth of knowledge and experience that you can get by just being somewhere else. Yes. That made me feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're absolutely right. There's so many different ways to do things, even in a very regulated and very constrained industry, right? And even just surrounding yourself with different people who think differently. It's especially in large organizations. I think there are strong cultures that typically develop that sort of create a type of thinking, and it's not a bad or a good thing. It's just that everybody has certain norms that they work to, and as you say, shaking those up a little bit and going somewhere where actually those things that you thought just everybody did aren't part of the culture can open your eyes quite a bit.
What so I think, because you were also asking how has this helped me, so precisely because I have been in so many different places and I have experienced so many different cultures and ways of doing things. When I came here for the first time, and then again 7 years ago, I actually started my day one with a meeting in the leadership team that I was joining to. And when I looked around the room, not only I was there, basically there was only one other woman and me. But everybody else except me were Danish.
Right. Okay.
Right. So now, 7 years after, I made an intentional effort that we needed to increase the diversity.
Yes.
So right now I have a leadership team that is formed of about 7 or 8 nationalities.
Yes.
And then, of course, diversity around the gender, that's also included. But for me, beyond gender is the diversity of thought, diversity of where did you grow, what had you experienced, et cetera, and it's quite rewarding to see how you really can do things different by mixing things up a little bit.
100%, and it seems from the outside, and again, you will have a better view of this than I will, but and there are other factors that were involved in this, of course, but it's one of the things that's driven Novo's success over the last few years, right, is increasing that diversity. Because I remember speaking to people there maybe 10 years ago, and one of the big challenges was that they were too Danish almost, and I mean that in the best possible way. But there's really been, as you've said, you've made a huge effort, but other leaders in the business have made a big effort to diversify that pool of talent and the way people think over the last several years.
Yeah, I think it's fundamental, because otherwise you start to create a lot of group thinking, and everybody starts to drink the same Kool-Aid, and that might feel very comfortable, but doesn't mean necessarily that it's right.
Yes.
And then again, I think it's also important to challenge our own assumptions and to be able to have these points of tension that makes you still be on your toes, because it's just not necessarily comfortable always the conversation, but it's enriching.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And then just to give you another example, having another conversation with the scientists, we were talking about, the external piece and what are the ideas, how the ideas are mature. And then this person came to me and said, like, but why should I work on somebody else's idea if my idea is the best? And I said,
Right.
okay, but how do you know that your idea is the best? I said,
Yes.
why don't you put it on the table? And then maybe you will find that, yes, for sure, your idea is the best, but you will get ideas and supplements by others to your idea. Or you may even find that, somebody else's idea is actually better, and then you can contribute to that.
Yes.
So it's, again, the thinking sometimes, right? That, of course, we are great, we are the best. Mm-hmm. And yet, maybe we need to challenge that assumption and be more open.
I think this is also something that people really encounter, and I'm sure you've encountered this as well, but a real challenge that people encounter as their careers progress, particularly into leadership roles, that there will be times where that happens and then you realize someone else's idea is better. There will also probably be times where you still disagree, but there's been a decision taken and you've got to get behind that decision. I think people really struggle with that sometimes. I don't know if there's anything you'd say on that.
Yeah, topic. Absolutely. And I think, for me, what is the most important is if you are in an environment where the conversation can take place. Mm-hmm. So that you can actually voice over your concerns or why that you are not in agreement. Also giving yourself the opportunity to listen to the others' arguments as to why, they believe that the path is the right path and so on. And at least you get the opportunity to understand that, maybe not necessarily agree, but at least understand and then get behind. Yes. Right? I see it more difficult when it's a bit of when it's imposed, and then you need to get behind. That's more difficult to swallow, right? But if you're given that opportunity to participate in the conversation and at least try to understand, then I think it's easier to say, what, this is the agreement that we got. Now you go behind, and going behind that doesn't mean only to say it while you are there at the meeting, but it's also how you are able to tell the same narrative to your team, to the teams, that you interact with. So it's not just, we agreed, but not really, right? But that you are really behind because it was a decision, you were part of that decision, even if you didn't necessarily agree with it. Yes. But now you're behind, and then you are behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Just staying on the point of, going back to, the point of diversity a little bit before we move on. It just struck me as well, in that situation then, when you go into the meeting and you're one of two women in the room, you're the only non-Danish person in the room, you clearly took it upon yourself to change that. A lot of people would worry about not being able to change that or challenge that. I'm just interested in sort of, I suppose for other women or other people who find themselves in the national the ethnic minority in a situation or whatever it might be, were there things that helped you to make those changes? Were there things that helped you to drive that change, do you think?
Yeah, it's I am from Mexico, right? So as a starting point, I have many of these minority elements, if you want. Okay. But the interesting thing, I have never really let those being labels that I hang myself with. Yes. So for me, it is what are really the core values that you have, and what is the purpose that you have in life, right? If you want, and then through those two, then aligning what you do and what you believe and what you tolerate and where is that you want to have the conversation or not. So really, it's now more recent that I am thinking more, okay, I am a female leader because of the impact that I can have on others. Right. But throughout my career, being a more junior leader, so that was never really in my mind. Okay. So it's just, okay, this is something that I believe it's relevant and worth having a discussion around, putting my neck out to have that conversation, or not. So it was always around this. Where do I think that I can make a difference?
Yeah.
Not asking for permission to make a difference. That's the other
Okay.
thing that I think it's important. But just, do you see that there is something that you can do something about? Either you do it or you put a proposal as to how you do it differently,
Yeah.
right? So rather than, again, just trying to fall victim a little bit of, oh, I am a woman, I am, well, yes, you can take that approach, but I think it's not necessarily very helpful.
No, fair enough. So your sort of decision in that situation was just, well, I'm going to create diversity in my team because the company needs that and the organization needs that, and that's the bit I can control. And then you can have those conversations over time, and hopefully that starts to move the agenda.
Yeah, and funny enough, because back at that time when I came, the whole diversity was not really big in the agenda. So it was just like in other places that it's kind of a hidden topic right there at the bottom, or a footprint. But that for me was not a question. So I saw the need to bring more diversity in my team in general, not just in the leadership team. And I started working towards that. And then, of course, it became a topic in the leadership team, in the executive team. But like in many other places, diversity labeled as gender diversity, which is the easier piece to work with. And yes, of course, we all align. We all try to work towards that. But again, for me, it was way beyond just gender. And I have been fortunate to have great people that they also happen to come from different places and different ways of being brought up and etc. So it's it worked out. It has worked out okay.
That's good. That's good. So I have a big question for you now, Karin. You've been through lots of transitions in your career, from sort of going to Arizona in the first place to then moving to big pharma, then moving to Switzerland. And as we said, the sort of the geographic shifts, but then also in your role at Novo, you've expanded that and moved into new areas and lots of variety, as we talked about at the beginning. I guess if you reflected on all of that experience and you ran into yourself, maybe on your first day at Roche or early in your career at least, what do you think are maybe one or two key things from a career perspective that you've learned that you would share with yourself back then?
Yeah, I think if I were, sitting with myself 30 years ago, I would probably say, it's very important that you stick true to your values.
Yes.
That's the one thing. And second is really, where is that you want to leave a footprint in wherever you go, right? And if you, and this is probably what I was alluding to before. So if you are able to understand that, then it becomes easier for you to make the choices. We talk a lot about prioritization. We talk a lot about empowerment and time and so on. And that has helped me. And I was able to get to that point, I would say, late in my career. And if I would have those tools, 30 years ago, probably, would be a different version and maybe a better version of myself today as a leader and as a scientist, and who knows.
Yeah, I think some of these things do tend to form as you get older, right? You start to realize things about yourself and what's important to you and things like that. But essentially, I guess taking that time to think about, well, what's important to me, and also what do I want to be different because I was here? What impact do I want to have? What's the change I want to make in it could be in the room or it could be in the world, right?
Exactly. It doesn't have to be, grandiose plans, because of course things change. You change as an individual. You learn things about yourself, and you learn things that that trigger you and how to manage those. You learn so many things in a journey like this. Yes. But at the same time, I still believe that that those values, at least for me, they have been quite useful. And throughout my career, I have really operated with those values at the front. And I think it has helped me. So for me, it's always about what is the bigger purpose, right? The bigger purpose of serving patients or bringing, new, better treatments. And if I am able to keep that as the North Star, then
Yes.
everything else goes back to and relates to this. Is this really helping that? And for me, at least, again, if I stick to that, then good things happen. Good things
Right.
happen
Yes.
for me. Good things happen for the people that I have around me, and so on. So it's maybe a basic principle that some would say, yeah, but the real world doesn't work necessarily like that, or not everybody works like this. True, but that's a problem.
Yeah.
This is the approach that I take, and this is what works for me, and this is what makes me go to bed, every night and say, yes, I did what I needed to do for the bigger purpose at the end of the day.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think most people don't make that decision at any point, right? Or maybe they do by accident, but most people sort of just respond to what happens to them in the world around them rather than being deliberate about what they want to, could be what they want to achieve, could be what difference they want to make, as we've said, could be what's important to them, what kind of parent they want to be, what kind of scientist they want to be, what kind of person they want to be. I think a lot of people just drift and react rather than being deliberate about that decision.
Yeah, and to this I will also add, somebody not too long ago asked me if I had a plan since the beginning of where I wanted to go. And when I answered, no, I didn't have a plan, they looked at me like, how come you didn't have a plan, right? I was like, no, I didn't have a plan. And now I can tell you that I have a plan, but, 30 years ago, I didn't have a plan. Other than, yes, I would like to go into industry. And it was quite surprising. And maybe, yes, for some other people, they really see, the plan and the path and so on. For me, no, it was not necessarily like that, right? So it's also interesting because, for different people need different things. And I was usually open to just, when the opportunities would come, being open to them and then say, why not, right?
Yes.
Or what if? And that I think has been part of the path, because in the road there were many forks that I needed to make, left or right. And then, of course, if I had taken a different decision back then we'd probably be in a very different place today.
Yes. And like you touched on earlier, it helps to stay curious, right? Because that means lots of things become interesting.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, fab. So we're recording this right at the start of 2025, Karin. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you for any forward-looking statements or anything like that. But what are you excited about as we head into the new year?
I am excited about the work that we're doing in research. Right, we are working in an area of artificial intelligence, and it's a buzzword today. But hopefully, through the efforts that we're doing in our team, we are starting to make it a reality. And for me, just the idea that we will be able to progress things faster to the clinic where it really matters, and then be able to make decisions, it's very exciting.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Of course, there is a lot that needs to happen for that, and but it's just a journey that I'm really very excited about. Yeah. So I'm hoping that at the end of the year we'll have a pipeline that actually speaks to the way that we are approaching this, and hopefully has better quality.
Yeah, absolutely. We had very recently, Dave Hallett, who is the CSO at Recursion, on the podcast. And, they've got phase 2 data coming soon from AI designed drugs and things like that. And I think he was saying that, there's still quite a lot of skepticism around this, but it's great to see companies like Novo embracing it and getting behind it, because, one of the things we talked about is that from a technology point of view, AI in general, but in drug discovery specifically, is in some ways going to be less of a substantial change than we think it's going to be. But in some ways, it's going to be a change that we can't even conceive. And so it's important that people are coming at it from different places and with different levels of expertise and experience and things like that. I think it's great to see.
Absolutely. I think, there is a lot of hype in this. And of course, this is not the solution to everything.
No.
But certainly, if we are able to identify which are the spaces that this can enable us to basically potentiate what we can do as human beings, I think it's going to be very exciting. But certainly, it's not the solution for everything. And it's not that tomorrow we're going to have, plenty of molecules or forget about the molecules. The molecule, I think, is a space that it's probably a bit more real. But we need to start from before, right? How are we understanding the disease? How are we understanding the residual risk? And then can we select the best biology? And then how are we able to really know that is true?
Yes.
So it's still going to take some time, but it's exciting nevertheless.
And this is potentially another big question. From what you can see in the work that you're doing then, in a sort of world in a few years' time where drug discovery is AI enabled, how do you think the role of the scientist changes in that?
I think that the scientists will always have a role, and actually not only the scientists at the bench, but of course the scientists in general, because you still need that interpretation, right?
Yes.
The machine will help you maybe see patterns that you do not see and so on, but you still need to contextualize it.
Right.
And so there is, and this is also something that I tell to my scientists at the lab, is like, don't worry, because we are not going to become irrelevant anytime soon. There is still, somebody needs to look at this and then say, yeah, okay, it makes sense, right? Or okay, that's an interesting thing. We need to go and validate in the lab, or we need to validate in different ways. So there is still plenty for us as human beings to do. So it's basically keeping the human being in the loop, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Karin, it's a fascinating time. Thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe and share it with someone else you think will benefit. And for more podcasts, videos, blogs, and insights, come follow me, Tom Froggatt, on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Medium, or TikTok. See you next time.